Welcome to the S.O.A.P.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the S.O.A.P. This episode we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm normally against spoiler-filled episodes, but Venom just come out recently and it was good. It was good enough that we want to do a whole episode on just the movie, not talking about anything else with it. For those who haven't seen it, I would recommend avoiding this episode. As much as we would love you to listen, this one will definitely have spoilers and it is worth seeing without the spoilers. So, I'm joined by Corey. Welcome, Corey.
Hey everyone. I just want to emphasize by saying this is filmed a little bit differently than we're used to. Usually we sort of record on our own and over a chat. I'm actually sitting just next to Dan currently.
Yeah, we've done it a couple of times. We had Mick do it on the VR episode. Delphine's done a few things over here as well. But in general, this isn't how we do it, but it is something that we'd like to do in the future. We're just trying to get the funds to be able to have multiple microphones set up all in the one recording. So there's something for the future, but hopefully it works well for this episode. But let's talk about it. Venom, how good was it?
It was brilliant. I've actually seen the movie 3 times now.
Do you want to tell us why? Or?
No, I don't want to tell you why. And ironically, the reason this came up as a topic was because the second time I went and saw it, Dan was sitting 3 rows behind me without me knowing. So, yeah, that's why we sort of decided afterwards that this was a good topic for recording.
Now, for me, this kind of blew me away because I know what Venom is. I haven't read any of the comics or anything like that. But, I mean, I saw the trailers. We're flooded with superheroes. You know, there's so many of them. And this isn't like Logan or Deadpool or that, which pulls like the R18 plus cards. This is just like everything else, the Avengers, everything like that. Venom, I mean, I hadn't read the comics. The look of Venom, maybe not the most appealing, just straight out of the box. But, you know, friends wanted to see it, jumped in, and maybe that's why I enjoyed it so much, because I sat there and a friend of mine said it was really slow at the start, but I found it just the whole way through. I thought the pace was good. There is one little issue they have with plot at the very start, but in general, the whole movie I was hooked in. I enjoyed it. It was funny. It was clever at times. The action was great. Covered all the tick boxes for everything.
I think it hit that sort of like middle ground in between like an Avengers ha-ha funny movie and like Deadpool Logan, because it's not your typical sort of superhero will punch people but nothing else type movie, but it's not quite on the we're going to kill off every character that's not a main character level of Logan and Deadpool like you mentioned. As for the movie being slow, I can sort of understand for maybe the first 5 minutes of the movie. After that, nah. It's pretty well thought out, and the way that it's structured worked really, really well.
Yeah, I thought the pace was really good. Like, the main character, Eddie Brock, you see him where he starts, what gives him a good reason to be in the position he's in, and then how he finishes up. All of it made sense in terms of that character. So let's talk a little bit about Eddie Brock. Tom Hardy, perfect fit for that role.
Oh, 100%. We spoke a little bit about it previously about I'm a huge Tom Hardy fan, and when I first heard that he would be playing Venom, I was instantly excited for this movie, and he's done exactly what I thought he was going to do, and he played the character perfectly, not even just as Eddie Brock, but as, I guess, sort of the outline for Venom and the character itself, he was absolutely perfect for.
I think with the character, like, the whole time you know he's going to fuck up. Like, they set that up really well, is that he means well, but he's that guy who always means to do well and then fucks it up completely. And this movie set it up really well. And that's how we get him with Venom and that, and it makes him so believable. Venom obviously takes a like to Eddie Brock, the character. You know, it's not he doesn't find some magical reason or that. It's just that character is that good, and Venom sees that. But the whole movie, like, you see it as well. Like, if you took Venom out, he's still an entertaining character just by himself.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, like you said, you knew he was going to fuck up from the beginning. Like, the first maybe 2-3 minutes you see the character, you know he's going to fuck up somehow. And I think that works really well, both in comics and in the fact of Tom Hardy's character, that he is going to fuck up. And Venom's not a regular superhero or supervillain. He's one of those anti-hero type characters. So you can't stick him with a character like, I don't know, a Peter Parker or something like that from a regular Spider-Man movie. You needed someone who was a bit more fucked up than a sort of a regular character. And Tom Hardy and Eddie Brock are both that sort of character.
I mean, essentially, it's like a M-rated version of Deadpool in a way.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with that. It cuts out a lot of the blatant, I guess, bloodshed and that sort of stuff for a bit more toned down. But the typical premise of the anti-hero is exactly the same.
Now, I was surprised that the romance was actually a bit interesting at the start. You know, it wasn't graphic or anything like that. It was just, it was timely, it was concise, and it gave you a reason as to why it was in there. But, you know, they set this character up so well with where he starts from. I mean, he's working at the newspaper. I mean, is that, you know the comics. Is that in the comics or?
Yeah, it's in the comics. They made a slight reference to something else that they didn't exactly go into depth with the movie, which I think they're holding out for a later movie that we'll talk about later. But he previously worked at the Daily Bugle, which people would recognise from the Spider-Man universe. It's not blatantly obvious that he's a Spider-Man character just by looking at him, but the fact Eddie Brock used to work there and was fired due to Peter Parker, then moved to a new town, and that's sort of where the movie picks up from. He's engaged to to Anne. And yeah, that's basically where it picks up, is after, I think, 6 months, I think it mentions, of him leaving the Daily Bugle and starting that new life.
One of the things I was a bit amused by was how much I enjoyed the references with the cat. Why was the cat such an important character? You know, like, it's so random, it's so out there, but yet you look back at the movie, you still remember. Like, they kept throwing the cat in there. I guess that's part of the believable nature of where he came from and what he lost at the very start of the movie.
Yeah, a little bit. I think they plugged it a little bit too much.
I'm a cat lover.
See, I'm allergic to them, so I'd prefer a lot less cat. But yeah, it was a nice little thing that just made it a little bit more funny to those who sort of were paying attention to it throughout the movie.
Yeah, the comedy works so well. I mean, you had, once he does, you know, interact with Venom and that, the whole eating, and when he's, you know, he wants the potato gems, he wants the beer, he wants everything, you know, and it was pretty, my stomach felt for that scene, watching everything that he went through. That comedy, though, it works so well with everything. Especially
the scene in the restaurant where he just loses the plot and starts swimming with the lobsters and eating them live because he can't eat dead food. There's just so many little things in the movie that, when you put them together, seem, I guess, random on their own. But the more and more they kept going with it, it just progressively got funnier and funnier, because it wasn't just a one-time thing. They carried a lot of their jokes from the beginning of the movie onwards.
Yep. So, I mean, we've talked Eddie Brock. What about the symbiotes? We're talking Venom, but Venom's not the only one. This is a whole alien race called the Clintar, I believe is their name. What's their go?
The Clintar is an alien race, from what I understand of them, because it is a very broad thing, because there are so many of them now in comic book terms. But basically, the way they work is, it was all started from one symbiote. They have offspring, but have no physical attachment to their offspring. And the way that it works is basically each one's stronger than the last, which in comic book terms was, I guess, a little bit more well laid out than what it was throughout the movie. But you only really get to see the introduction of one other symbiote in the movie, which you start with Venom, obviously the titular character and the one that everyone knows, but then they bring in Riot, which was a little bit of a surprise to me just because of the random nature of how he was brought in.
Yeah, so they changed up a few things. They changed up not just the characters, but their purpose and everything that they were doing. I mean, their plan in the movie they talk about how we're trying to leave Earth and inhabit other planets, and that they're the key. In reality, it's the other way around, is they're trying to come and take over our planet. I mean, how does that translate against the comics?
It's pretty accurate. I think the initial point of Venom coming down and that starting the whole sort of, I guess, the creation process of the symbiotes. I don't necessarily remember whether it was a space trip that they initially found him. I think it was. I think they found him on a meteorite from memory. But I could also be mixing that up with the movie. There's a lot of stuff they missed in terms of backstory for the characters, or they tweaked backstory to the characters and that sort of stuff. Especially with the introduction of Riot, just because they limit the fact that Venom in comic book terms is actually the father of Riot. That's at no point mentioned.
They actually changed it up a lot in this. I believe Venom was one of a squad and Riot was the leader of the squad in this movie.
Yeah, that was my sort of... They didn't sort of go into too much detail with it, but that's sort of the vibe you got from watching the movie, was that Riot was the Genghis Khan of symbiotes. He was the one that ruled everything and had Venom as a minion. But, like I said, that's a massive change from the comics, where Venom was brought down to Earth, but then Riot, as well as the rest of that security squad that Riot's in the comics, is actually extracted from Venom.
Now, visually, I found them quite interesting. We see them in a standalone state, I guess, where they're warping and mutating, and I'm not even sure how I would describe how they look like in that state.
Yeah, it's really disturbing to watch in live-action versions. There was also a thing that we had a slight disagreement about originally, which was the look of the semi-symbiote sort of form, where it's half face, half symbiote. Because I thought it was quite clever, just because it's like peeling off half a face, which with the symbiotes, the whole thing is that they attach. So it's supposed to be like a very thick, goopy skin, which is, I guess, what it was, but I think you had a slight different opinion on it.
Well, look, I mean, that was one of the things when I watched the trailers, I was like, oh, I'm not really a big fan of how this looks. But on the flip side, I can't imagine a better way that they could have done it. So, I mean, if you don't have a better solution, they have done the best option they have. But there was something just not right about it. Was like wearing a latex, kind of really thick latex mask. Whereas I thought that being bonded, there would be more of a connection between the symbiote and the skin, you know? Like it was coming out of the skin rather than, you know, just someone wearing a suit.
Yeah, no, I can see that, but at the same time, I think that, even in comics, that's basically what it is that the symbiotes are a meat suit on top of whoever their host is. And what's really weird about it that I don't think we've sort of mentioned is the, I guess, mental and emotional connection between the symbiote and the host. We've spoken a bit about the physical, the way that it looks, the way that it's presented, the way that it works in general. But in terms of emotional, there's a huge character change between Venom when he first fuses with Eddie Brock and Venom at the end of the movie.
Yeah, that comes back to the whole Eddie Brock was such a great designed character, and you see his personality very strong before Venom even becomes into this picture. And then it gives you enough of a reason that you would see why, when Venom does merge and they start sharing memories and ideas and that, why Venom would sway towards working with Eddie Brock rather than taking control.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you can literally see the connection between them changing as the movie progresses. At first, Venom's entire plan is, I'm going to eat your universe, basically. And by the end of it, not even by the end of it, I'd say probably halfway through the movie, it completely flips. And he's like, I like this place. I don't want to leave. And it's, like you said, it goes back to the Eddie Brock character. It works so well in this movie. And it, I guess, bleeds through onto the rest of the characters.
Yep.
It changes how the movie is perceived. If you put anyone else in that role, or even slightly change the Eddie Brock character, I don't think this movie works as well as it does. but because of the way they've set it, the way they've designed the movie, even the slight changes they've made to Origin, has made this movie a lot better than I think people were assuming it would be.
Yeah, I mean, Venom was so badass in the movie. Like, the moment he starts talking, it's cool. Like, it's not like you have to warm up to the character of that. It's from the moment they introduce his voice and he starts taking over, you're instantly on his side. So I was a huge fan of that side of how they did Venom. But I wonder what it would have been like if we had have gone a darker route with Venom. I mean, eating is his thing. It's not just animals or that kind of thing. He very much wants to eat humans. That's a very strong thing for him. I mean, an R18 version with maybe more of a horror element, where does that take us?
I think that would have been my preferred. Like, don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved this movie. But I feel like the Venom character sort of needed, for lack of better words, the Deadpool treatment, where you can't have it as a completely comedy and kid-friendly movie like you have with Spider-Man and the Avengers and all that sort of stuff. I think the character is that dark, and even if you do that version, you can go more towards the actual sort of comic book version of Venom, which is way more aggressive and angry, and I think it would have suited a more even MAR-rated movie type.
Yeah. And it's strange because I loved this movie. I really, really loved it. And all my criticism aside, I can't praise the movie enough. But yet I'm still wondering what that would have been like. And that's a very interesting thought, to like something, but also be like, maybe they could have done it completely different.
I think that's a good thing, though, because it means if they do want to... Because we're not opposed to seeing them completely restart franchises from comic book movies. They've done it 3 times with Hulk now. We're not going to go back onto that topic again. We've already discussed this. Go check out the Avengers podcast.
I hear Ed Norton's the best Hulk.
Yeah, you should get your ears checked. But it's one of those things where if they did want to go and change it, even for a future movie, because we'll talk about it a little bit later, they've already set up for a future movie if they decide to go down that role. And they could change that to an MAR-rated movie, which, in my opinion, I feel like they kind of need to with the plans that they seem to have.
Well, I think I'd disagree on that, because once you set a level, you've set the audience. And by setting it at M, you're setting it at everyone who's, 15 and above. But realistically, we know with an M rating or that you're probably going to have people somewhere around 10 to 12 still watching that based on the parents' guidance. So the audience that is watching this movie is pretty young. If you were a year or two later to introduce a new movie that was R, you're going to expect those same people to be watching it, but now it's out of their rating bracket. I don't know that they can change it without rebooting completely, and you need a time gap to be able to do that.
No, I'll agree with that. I will go into a little bit of detail with the post-credits scene now, just so I can give a bit more context into what I'm going on about.
Yep.
The post-credit scene shows, I think, the greatest post-credit scene in Marvel, just because of the actor who was in the post-credit scene. Seeing Carnage pop up, not even just Carnage, but the character behind him show up as Woody Harrelson, I think made me super excited for the next movie. But for anyone who knows comics, knows that I don't think you can realistically do a M-rated version of Carnage. Like, the whole reason the character got his name was killing people and writing carnage in blood at the scene. Like, it's not a kid-friendly character to introduce, even with Woody Harrelson, who can play kid-friendly roles, as the main character.
It's a big choice in actor, and I guess that's a lot of faith in, A, they knew that they had a good movie, and B, they feel like they've got a second movie that's going to be just as good. I'm a big fan of Woody Harrelson, and playing Cletus Cassidy, it's definitely exciting, and they definitely went that dark route. He's writing in blood in the 5 seconds that you see him. If that's 5 seconds, 2 hours of that is going to be a lot worse. But still, I feel like they're going to tone that all the way back. They're going to want to push that kind of level, but always hold themselves short. And I feel like that's going to let them down a little bit. Probably still a great movie, but not hitting the maximum potential that they could have.
Yeah, no, that's sort of my issue, I think, is that I really want them to hit that max potential, because these are characters that I adored in comic books, just because they were so alike but so different. Just in terms of the concept of the characters, like you're getting one symbiote who's just the offspring of another symbiote, who's the offspring of another symbiote. On that basic premise, you'd think the characters would be boring. But then you look at each one and the differences between them, and it gives such a different quality to even just Marvel movies. So when I saw Carnage during that scene, I wanted more than what we got from the Venom movie. I wanted it at bare minimum to be MA, which, like you said, I don't think they will, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But that's what me, as a comic book fan, really, really would want.
Well, I mean, we're talking villains, so I guess we've skipped over a lot of the whole Riot, but also the person that he merges with is the founder of the Life Foundation. Now, as a villain, I actually really enjoyed this guy. I felt like he was believable without needing any superpowers or anything like that. He caused everything, and I felt like he could still do enough damage without needing to, to turn into a super powerful creature or anything like that. I actually felt a little bit ripped off when he merged with Riot. That felt like they'd taken two great villains, and instead of having two different ones that we could have either had at the same time or across separate movies, and then they just put it together, and I felt like I lost a lot of both Riot and I can't remember his name now, but I felt like I lost a lot of those two characters by cutting them short and merging them.
Yeah, no, I'll pay that. I don't really know why they changed that, because that's a massive change from the comic book adaptation. They're still run by the Life Foundation, but there is multiple versions of Riot, basically. There's, I think, the 5 in the squad that they have, the security squad for the Life Foundation, and Riot is supposed to be the aggressive, take no shit version, basically. And like you said, the character himself, the leader of the Life Foundation, was really, really good. I even mentioned to you, and I'm not going to say the actual name for certain reasons, but I referenced him to a head of a very big company in Australia.
Carlton Drake is his name. I finally found it. Carlton Drake. He was evil, but he was believable evil. He wasn't like trying to be Hitler, running around just murdering everyone. He had a specific goal in mind, and he would do anything to get to that goal. And I guess that's why the merging with Riot half made sense, because they both wanted, these mutual goals. But like I said, Carlton Drake by himself was enough that, you didn't have to have a big superhero showdown to make him like a standalone villain.
Yeah, no, and I think he would have worked well as a standalone villain, and I'm going to give all the credit in the world to Riz Ahmed, the character who played him, because I think he did a very good job of basically flipping between the, hey, I'm in front of the cameras, happy, we're curing cancer type character, and then flipping to the, we're experimenting on homeless people, evil dickbag that he ends up being. And you can tell right from the beginning that he's going to be a big part, because that's I guess where Eddie Brock starts in this movie, is losing his job because he refused to have a peaceful interview with Carlton Drake.
I feel like as much as we know he's the evil person, the deeds that he does kind of get forgotten. You've got Venom, you've got Riot and all that. That's the focus of it. But he's just murdering people like left, right and center. He's bringing in homeless people that he knows what he's doing is going to kill them. He's more than happy to do it to his own employees. Like he's just murdering anyone. There's no one that was sacred to him. Anyone could die just so he could get to his goals. That's what made him so believable. But yeah, it just blows my mind. We always forget that he did all of this stuff just by himself. And
it's also a really, in real life terms, it's one of those things where even if you hate him, if you think about it properly, the dude realistically cured cancer, like a form of cancer in the movie, by experimenting on homeless people. You look at it in real life, would you take experimenting on homeless people for a cure to cancer? Like, there is a moral decision on what he's doing is wrong. And don't get me wrong, I think it's blatantly obvious that what he's doing is wrong. But to anyone outside of that just see the front of the Life Foundation, he's the perfect human.
All right, well, I guess the ending then comes down to both Riot and Carlton Drake and what happens with them. Riot as a action kind of character there, I mean, we don't see too much. Venom gets a little bit as he's being hunted. We see a lot of technology being used against him, and we see him pretty much murdering a whole bunch of bullies when Carlton Drake sends all his bodyguards and that against Venom. Riot, though, the scene was great. I mean, he had all the weapons. That's pretty iconic from the comics and that. But there wasn't that much of Riot in there.
No, and I think that comes down to you get introduced to Riot very, very early. I think he's actually one of the first people you see in the movie, technically, when the meteor crashes.
Spaceship.
The spaceship, sorry.
Yeah.
When the spaceship crashes. And he takes over the body of one of the people at the scene and just keeps body hopping from, I think it was, India or somewhere in Asia.
It's Malaysia, I think he was in. I think he ends up in maybe like Singapore or something like that. But, I mean, that's something that we probably should talk about. 6 months. When we see the opening with the crash and Riot jumping from bodies, taking over people, murdering a lot of people, we then have a 6 month gap to show...
Actually, the 6 month gap is after Eddie losing his job. So,
yeah. So that's to show what happens with Eddie and, you know, and that makes what happens to Eddie a lot believable, but what it then does is it undoes what happens with Riot, because for 6 months, Riot's out there
in a child's body chilling around Malaysia. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, I mean, he's probably still in the old lady at that point, but we know that the symbiotes, they don't bond so well with any person, otherwise he wouldn't be jumping from body to body. So, I mean, that gap is a pretty big gap. I don't know how they overlooked that. Like, that should be something that they screened and someone in the audience should have gone, hang on, 6 months. What's going on for 6 whole months?
In saying that, though, like, I think Riot in this movie is slightly different to how Venom works in terms of the symbiote sort of effect. Because if you look at Riot, he jumped from person to person, but there was no effect at any point. There was none with the ambulance driver, there was none with the old lady, there was none with the kid, and there was none with Carlton Drake. If you watched the other symbiotes that they were testing throughout the movie, the instant they get into a body, it took, 30 seconds before that body completely erupted?
Yeah, they were chewing through bodies pretty quickly, and then you did have, you had the homeless guy who had the symbiote inside for days, and even Venom was inside the homeless person that Eddie Brock knew for...
Oh, the crazy lady.
Yeah, the crazy lady. You would assume that was at least a day or two, if not longer. So there was times when that did happen. I just feel like everything with Riot at the start wasn't really thought through. There was more just we need these things, here's a couple of plot points, then let's actually get into the movie, rather than, like with Eddie Brock, it was so detailed. They'd planned it, it flowed, it all worked, and then on the other side, Riot just didn't.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and the only other sort of point that sort of takes away from what I was saying about them being able to take bodies for longer, if they were keeping in comic terms, it makes a bit more sense, because each offspring from the symbiote is stronger than the last. So you take Venom, who can control people for a decent amount of time, then make them stronger, it makes sense that he can hold them for 6 months. But even then, Venom was able to hold Anne for a brief period of time, but enough time that they didn't erupt within a minute.
Yep.
So that doesn't really, I guess, correlate to what it should have. But, I don't know. There's a lot with that sort of 6 months that doesn't get explained in massive depth. Like, Carlton Drake, what was he doing during that 6 months? Because he's had the symbiotes for near that entire time.
Yep.
And all of a sudden now he's experimenting on homeless people.
Yeah, that 6 months only works for Eddie Brock, and it works for Eddie Brock so well, but then everything else just took a hit as a result of it.
Yeah, because Eddie Brock goes from living in his nice little penthouse with Anne to being an alcoholic who's living off Chinese food from a takeaway store in a little shitbox apartment across the road from the dude playing guitar.
Yeah, it's a big fall from grace for him. The other thing about the symbiotes, though, their weakness. I mean, Superman's got kryptonite, but not, find that everywhere. The symbiotes, they've got some pretty serious weaknesses that literally anyone can exploit. And when they exploit it, it's not like this might hurt you a little bit, but you can still do something. It's completely crippling to them.
Yeah. I will point out, though, that if they take the actual version of Carnage from the comic books and don't tweak it too much, from Carnage forward, from any offspring, as far as I'm aware, they actually have immunity to quite a few of those, I guess, blatantly obvious weaknesses.
Yep.
The main one being fire. Carnage has immunity to fire.
Yep.
So that sort of takes away the entirety of how this whole movie ended. You can't strap him to a rocket and set it off like they did to Riot. It doesn't work.
I mean, you got sound as well. Sound also played a huge factor in this one. Is that something that they got immune to as well?
I don't think so. I think certain symbiotes do. Like, we haven't spoken about it, but another one that was in that security squad that they just left out completely was, I think it's Screech or Scream?
Scream.
Right. Yeah, she controls sound barriers and that sort of stuff. So that is an immunity of her, obviously, because that's the entire point of it. But from memory, I can't remember any of the others having that effect to be able to stop that sound. But even then, the only thing we saw in the movie that can make that high pitch of a sound was the MRI machine.
We had the speakers at the rocket fight.
Which was a recording they used earlier in the movie of the MRI machine sounds. Because they used it in the office to separate Venom and...
But I guess the point is any speaker can do that. Like, literally anyone can walk around with a suit with a speaker and instantly be...
Do you have a copy of an MRI machine sound?
If I wanted to take down Venom, I would. Yeah, it just seemed like a very big flaw. Like, you can beat someone up, then it's a match of who's stronger, and, if they lose, they can get stronger to, beat the other person, all that kind of stuff. But just that sound and fire, I mean, I guess that's why they obviously thought about it later on in the comics and went, we'll make some immunities and that for it. But yeah, it's just a huge thing, and it really tones down the impact of Venom. Anyone who wants to, like, if you're not prepared, then Venom's going to always win. But, we think about, like, Lex Luthor and Superman. If he was able to get all that kryptonite all those times, anyone could get a sound recording that would pretty much impact Venom and a flamethrower.
In saying that, though, going back to a couple of the other movies we spoke about earlier, Logan dies to a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Like, anyone could have just stabbed him with a piece of wood.
Logan's thing, though, was he got super old. I mean, we're talking hundreds of years for Logan before. I mean, his thing was that he could regenerate, but as he was getting older, that effect was dying more and more. And that's why he took so much damage in the end, But
that's also the fact is, looking at both the other movies we spoke about with Logan and Deadpool, you can't just have a plethora of immortal characters that don't die but to specific things. Like, Deadpool genuinely can't die. He has a relationship with death. Logan, like you said, took hundreds, if not thousands of years to even be affected by anything because the regeneration stopped. If you have, like Superman you mentioned with kryptonite, you said it's not laying around everywhere. The only characters who seem to not have immunities that are stupidly hard to find are the characters that are technically just humans. Like, realistically, Batman's just a human. Black Panther's just a human.
Batman does have the power of money, though.
That's the best power of all. And so does Black Panther. Both my characters I mentioned are rich.
Yeah, I just, like, for me, the interesting part is the symbiotic relationship. And for me, if I wanted to see how someone took down Venom, I would rather see it being more about how they separate Eddie and Venom rather than, the sound instantly rendering the symbiote, pretty much inert.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And I guess there was one sort of flaw in it that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, which was when the spaceship crashed at the start of the movie, when they were bringing the symbiotes back. That whole thing was on fire.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's on the outside. The question is how much is on the inside. We don't know what's going on the inside, so, I mean, people are dying. Why they're dying, I'm not too sure, but it's not really giving us enough information to be like, yeah, there was definitely fire and it was so hot it would have killed all the symbiotes.
Riot was in that jet fire for about 30 seconds, if that, at the end of the movie. Obviously, it doesn't take much to take them down.
It did blow up, though.
Yeah, but he was already dead by the time it blew up. He disintegrated before it blew up.
Maybe we'll have to do tests and just get different symbiotes.
I suggest we use Aaron.
Poor Aaron. I mean, we've talked about the majority of the movie, and I probably don't want to spoil it anymore. We have obviously covered pretty much the majority of it, but there is a second post-credit scene. That was one of the strangest post-credit scenes that I've ever seen. We're talking about a chunk of Spider-Man, which is coming out later this year, being put into that movie with no reference to Venom, there was just no explanation why it was in there. It was just, hey, we are.
Yeah, no, when we were first talking about doing this podcast, you were actually super confused by what was going on with it, because you hadn't read anything about the short animated movie regarding Miles Morales as Spider-Man.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it. I know like Miles, and I have an idea of Spider-Man and, you know, the multiple incarnations and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of that movie, and especially it's such a different art style to anything else. And I'm just sitting there going, well, obviously it's Spider-Man. I could obviously tell it was Miles that was in it. But I was just scratching my head going, why am I watching this? Here I am waiting for like a tie-in to Venom, or, you know, I'm like, where's the punchline here? And there's just, literally there was never a punchline. It was just, enjoy 5 minutes. Hope you watch our movie, I guess, even though you don't know what the movie is.
I'd also like to point out how long that goddamn credit scene is prior to that Spider-Man thing. Yes. We sat there for about 15, 20 minutes watching these credits, hoping for another credit scene, and then we got 5 minutes of cartoon Spider-Man.
I learnt a lot about the different roles you can have in a movie and very different ways that you can have your name spelt. There's nothing to do sitting there. Like, you don't want to be like loud or noisy and annoy people or that. Obviously, everyone's waiting for it, so people are still talking, but that's a lot of fucking people. That is a lot of fucking people in a movie.
The special thanks screen, I think, went on for a good maybe 5 minutes of just the alphabet scrolling down, and I swear half of the names that I read were just the alphabet.
I feel like a lot of those names were just like copy-pasted, like. And same with the roles. There was some roles in there. I was like, is that really like a job for someone? And then you look at some of the names, because some of them were very unique. And then like later on, you'd be like the same role just with an extra word added and the same name for it. And you're just like, geez, they really wanted to make these people feel like they did something in this movie. It's like the boom mic holder and then like the special boom mic holder, and it's the same guy.
They really pushed it. I get the feeling they've done it on purpose. They wanted to see how long they could test people before they left before watching that animated Spider-Man short.
Maybe there's like a camera inside every theater and they're just like recording it and just like counting like how many suckers can we get to stay this long?
Nah, Tom Hardy's got it hooked up directly to his TV. He just sits there and laughs at people the entire time while the money floods in.
Tom Hardy's had a fair few interesting things to say about this. There's one point where he was like, there's at least 40 minutes of extra footage that they cut out, and he's had to like go back on things he said a couple of different times, and that it's going to be interesting to see if they do like a director's cut that adds a lot more, or maybe even adds some more of that violence or that we're talking about. Maybe there will be a cut that is a higher rating.
Well, see, like we know full well that Tom Hardy's played superhero characters before, because he played Bane in probably one of the most well-known, I guess, sets of movies of all time. And don't get me wrong, he had a mountain to climb by following up the movie that came before it. He was never going to reach Heath Ledger. But a lot of the other roles he's played from movies I've seen, he could have taken that to that darker place because of movies like Bronson and that sort of stuff. But I don't know. Eddie Brock as a character suits him perfectly, and I'm very interested to see where that continues from where this one left off.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of actors who play themselves in things. William Shatner in Boston Legal, Charlie Sheen in Two and a Half Men. Like, they're people who are playing... Tony Stark. You know, they're people playing themselves in, like, how they are in real life. When you can find a character that resembles something close to you, you know, obviously Tom Hardy doesn't have voices in his head, I hope. But, you know, that kind of crazy, like, you can see that, like, it's a fun kind of crazy, and I could definitely see Tom Hardy being that kind of person. And I think that's why he works so well in this movie, is that there was a relationship between who he is as a person and what this character has.
Yeah, no, that's I think the best way to sum it up, because even with... Although Bane is a very odd character, it was a very similar thing to that, where just the presence of the character and the way that he articulated himself throughout the movie, it was him. It wasn't a character, it wasn't anything like that, especially considering if they were going to do the character, that Bane character would have been a million times different from the way that it was. But the way that he played it was his way. And I think Eddie Brock was very similar in this, where he took a character that isn't necessarily 100% the most popular character in the world, but he made it a character that people will remember.
Definitely. Well, we might wrap it up there. Otherwise, we'll probably be longer than the movie itself. But I guess, like, closing thoughts, for me, it's always so easy to talk about the negatives. You know, that's what we do as human people, or as human beings, is we talk about what's wrong with something. But this movie, it had so many things that was right with it. I mean, I was surprised. I really enjoyed it. And I would highly recommend anyone who hasn't seen it. Probably shouldn't be listening to the podcast, but I would tell people, if you haven't seen it, go see it.
Where do you rank it among the movies from Marvel and DC that have come out so far this year?
Well, obviously below Ed Norton.
I said this year. Ed Norton hasn't done a movie since that last Hulk movie.
Look, I've watched it enough times this year that he might as well have done it this year. So, I mean, what do we got this year? We've got...
Avengers. I think Black Panther was start of the year, if I'm not mistaken.
For me, Avengers was so much going on. It wasn't so great. We had Deadpool 2.
Yes.
So it's probably up there in the same level. I really enjoyed Deadpool 2. I enjoyed it more than the first one because I hadn't spoiled it with every single trailer. That ruined Deadpool 1. Well, not ruined, but I lost a lot of the enjoyment from Deadpool 1 as a result. But, I mean, against Deadpool 2, it's either pretty on par or it's either pretty on par or above it. Avengers definitely below this. I way prefer Venom to Avengers. Ant-Man?
Yeah, sorry, Ant-Man.
Ant-Man was good.
I actually haven't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp yet.
Ooh.
So I'm a little bit behind with that one. I'm trying to think of what other ones came out this year. Like I said, I think Black Panther was, which, in my opinion, it's one of the best superhero movies I've ever seen. And I think I've mentioned on a previous podcast, but Michael B. Jordan is the sole reason for that. I adore Michael B. Jordan as an actor. What else did we have? We had... I think that's pretty much it for movies this year.
Spider-Man was last year, right?
I think so.
Yeah, in terms of it, Ant-Man was really, really good. It had some big flaws, but it's a family, fun, friendly movie. It's great to watch, but it's not something you're ever going to rate as the highest thing. Avengers had a lot of potential. It's got the budget. It's got all the big characters, but it had too many, in my opinion. Great movie, but they could have made it more concise.
You think that's bad? Wait till the next one, because they've still got half a universe to introduce.
Oh, they only have half a universe left. But yeah, I guess... Yeah, it's probably this year. It's probably my my favorite up against Deadpool 2. Those are the two that are winning it for me.
In my opinion, it's top 3 Marvel movies they've released.
Ever?
Yep. It goes up there with...
The Hulk.
Oh, you mean the Eric Bana one?
Oh, yeah, that was the best.
Top 3 for me is probably so far Black Panther. Like I said, I loved that entire Black Panther movie. Also, the soundtrack was pretty good as well for a superhero movie. I really liked that. Then it probably goes this, because I really did enjoy this Venom movie. It's probably number 2. And then before that, Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 together. Just those movies. I adore those movies.
I mean, 2 had something not right. I mean, Kurt Russell he's a great actor. I always love him, but I always seem to hate like the roles that he's in or that. Guardians of the Galaxy, like the characters they've got are great, but number 2, just the overall plot was a bit beyond what I thought it should have been. Number 1 definitely has to be one of the greatest ones that they've ever created. That one's definitely a masterpiece.
I think that's another one that's similar to this in terms of the fact that it's helped by the characters, the actors that are playing the characters. Like Dave Bautista as Drax is one of the funniest things in the world to me. Just the way he deadpans all of his lines works so well.
I still would have loved to have seen Vin Diesel try that, because it was between Vin Diesel and Dave Bautista.
Vin Diesel is Groot, so he's still in the movie.
Yeah, but for that role, for Drax, like Vin Diesel, obviously they're very similar in looks.
I think Bautista has that little bit extra size to him that Vin Diesel didn't.
Yeah, and I think he's got that drier sense of humor. Vin Diesel's probably the cooler of the person, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted that dry humor, the whole going invisible, like that joke works so well, but I couldn't see Vin Diesel, as much as I love Vin Diesel, I couldn't see Vin Diesel ever pulling that joke off.
No, and that's genuinely one of my favourite scenes in any movie, is that going invisible line. That still makes me laugh when I watch the movie.
I just love Rocket Raccoon stealing limbs and like, why does he need the leg?
And actually, an interesting fact that I don't think I mentioned during the Avengers podcast that I've recently learnt is Groot has an actual like English written word script that only Vin Diesel and the writer ever sees. That's how Vin Diesel, I guess, exclaims the words, and that when he's literally just saying "I am Groot," you still understand, is because he has a personal script that only he sees. And apparently, the very last line before Rocket fades away in Avengers is "I'm gonna miss you, Dad."
Oh, breaking my heart here.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the Groot character is in the comic books he can talk. There is a genetic disease that they have that over time, I guess their vocal cords and that constricts to the point that they can't really talk. But for the majority of the comics, he can actually talk in it. So it's very interesting that they cut straight to it and went, he's not going to be able to talk at all.
I think it gives something to the character, though. Which is weird to say, considering you're literally taking one half of the aspect of the character away in them talking. But it makes for some good jokes, as well as it gives something to the character, like teenage Groot when he's sitting there playing the video games and Rocket's yelling at him and all he's saying back is "I am Groot," and Rocket just keeps yelling at him, understanding what he's saying. It's hilarious, and that wouldn't work if he just spoke normally.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to the fact that they knew what they wanted out of each character. I mean, Groot has that kind of Chewbacca feel that really, I mean, Star Wars has been trying to make Chewbacca again, but hasn't been able to. We won't mention Jar Jar Binks at all. So, yeah, I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy is definitely one of the better ones out of there. I can't imagine too many other movies ever rivaling what the first one did. After a first movie, I mean, Iron Man 1, that's got to be up there as well.
Yeah, I think Guardians of the Galaxy will age better than Iron Man 1, though.
I mean, Ozzy Osbourne's song hasn't aged at all, it's still as metal as they come, and that's one of the things that sells you on. Like, I remember seeing when Iron Man was being announced and that, it was that song, and it's still, 20, 30 years later, it's still sounding absolutely amazing. I can't see Iron Man as a movie being any different.
You seem to forget, though, that Guardians of the Galaxy has probably two of the best soundtracks in all of the Marvel movies, and I have them both saved on my Spotify.
It's very different. The way that, because that's used to a purpose of making Star-Lord, like it references how he was on Earth and how he's no longer there, and that's his memory back to there. Whereas like Iron Man, it was just who he was, you know.
But even then, a lot of those songs, if you listen to them in context from Guardians, they are very reflective of the actual story. I think the song is called Father and Son from the second one, is basically the story of him and Ego. Yep. So their selection of choices aren't as, I think, random and funny as people seem to assume. They do have a lot of relevance to what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, going back to Venom, it's up there. It's definitely up there. I might say top 5 for me. Like I said, the Hulk movie with Ed Norton does have a special place just because it made me really like something that I really did not like beforehand. And I find that so something special. Guardians of the Galaxy, for me, came out of nowhere. They had a range of characters. They didn't choose the original characters. They've thrown references back to it. But they picked the right level, and I'm still following what's happening with James Gunn to try and work out what they can do, because I feel like without James Gunn and Dave Bautista, that really does die. They're taking away too much from it to ever recover. And Iron Man, when it came out, the impact it left, it's still there. It's still one of the greatest. So those are probably the top 3 for me. And Venom maybe sitting there at 4th, just behind there, but not by much. Like,
which realistically, for a standalone movie, because that's pretty much what Venom is at this point. I know they've set up for a second one, but as just Venom, that's pretty like high level movies that you're putting it in there with.
Yep.
Which is a testament to how good this movie really is.
All right, well, let's wrap it up there. Thanks, Corey, for being on.
No worries at all.
For everyone who listened, hope you enjoyed this. This is just our opinions on it. We'd love to hear your opinions. Hit us up in the comments of that. Facebook, YouTube, Reddit in particular. We'd love to hear more from what people are thinking. And yeah, shoot us a message. See you on the next episode.
No worries. See you guys.
You have been listening to the S.O.A.P podcast. Join us again soon for another episode, and don't forget to hit us up on all the social media platforms, because we love hearing from you.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.